Hey guys, welcome into the 14. I'm Nick Cole, and we're breaking down all of the Week 8 SEC football action from a betting perspective. Today, we're talking about the Tennessee Vols visiting the Alabama Crimson Tide. This game is being played on Saturday, October 23rd at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. That's 6 local time in Tuscaloosa at Bryant-Denny Stadium. It's going to be televised on ESPN. From a betting perspective, this game opened as Alabama minus 29, and the lines moved a decent amount. As of Thursday afternoon, the Crimson Tide's favored by 25 points. Over-under on this game opened at 67.5 and is now at 67. Bringing in our betting analyst, Christopher Smith. Christopher, what do you make of this old school SEC rivalry game?
Yeah, Nick, I guess when we were kids growing up, you were in Tennessee and I was in Alabama, and this third Saturday in October was a huge deal. But now it's maybe, kind of an unexciting Power 5 game that I guess is big because it's one of the 4 SEC games we have going on this week. But from a betting standpoint, I still think it's very interesting. So why don't we get into the weather, injuries, and give us Nick's news and notes as well?
Yeah, sure. So we'll start with the weather. On Saturday evening in Tuscaloosa, the temperature should be in the 60s. Obviously, going to drop as the evening goes on. We have a light wind and no expected rain. So pretty clean track for weather in Tuscaloosa on Saturday night. Key injuries for this game. Let's start with Alabama. Outside linebacker Drew Sanders is doubtful for this game. Defensive lineman Byron Young is a game time decision. And safety DeMarco Helms is dealing with an ankle injury. So I want to monitor that one going into Saturday. On the Tennessee side of things, everybody's talking about the quarterback position, right? Quarterback Hendon Hooker was injured late in that game against Ole Miss last week. And we'll talk a little bit more about him here in a minute. But also starting running back Tyon Evans missed the Ole Miss game last week, seeing if he may be coming back. Center Cooper Mays and offensive tackle Cade Mays, those Mays brothers, are also questionable with various injuries coming into this game. Tennessee's super tight-lipped when it comes to injuries. So we may have to wait right up until kickoff to find out about some of these. And as you can tell by some of the roles taken by some of these players, it's pretty important to know if they're going to play or not based on the line that we have in this game. So you may want to hold back your money betting this game until you know for sure on some of those names. And on the news and notes, let's start with Alabama and how they got right in week 7. Obviously, week 6, they were the national story for the wrong reason, going to Kyle Field, Texas A&M, and losing to the Aggies. Is this Saban team going to lose back-to-back games potentially? And the answer was, of course not. The defense had 3 interceptions, including a pick 6. The offense did not turn the ball over at all, was 12 of 16 on third downs. Back to the defense, I think there were 8 sacks against an air raid offense in that game. Bryce Young threw for 348 yards and 4 touchdowns to 4 different pass catchers. And Brian Robinson had a couple of rushing touchdowns. So it's sort of all the way around. Everybody stepped their game back up and got to where they needed to be a dominant force in the West again, to nobody's surprise, right? And then on the Tennessee side of things, obviously they suffered a really tough, emotional home loss where many items were thrown on the field on Saturday night at Neyland Stadium. And yeah, Lane Kiffin, their ex-lover, came back and took care of business in their building, and there were some emotional outbursts that have been the headlines. But the most important thing to me is about the quarterback situation there. And we talked about Hendon Hooker being injured in the final drive of that game, and he was replaced by Joe Milton, who we've talked about time and time again, somehow was the starting quarterback for the Vols at the beginning of the season. And he sort of reinforced the idea that this is a completely different team when he's in the game. In that final drive, Milton entered that game, could have been the hero, and instead ran out of bounds on the final play of the game as they lost 31-26. Just a reminder that as you're trying to bet this game, you need to know, is Hooker starting or is Milton starting? It's probably the most important thing to know, no matter which side of this bet you're going to be on, in my opinion. And the last thing I'll bring up before I kick it over to you, Christopher, Nick Saban owns Tennessee. There's really no other way to put that. The Crimson Tide has won 14 consecutive games in this series. You mentioned in our childhood, maybe this was one of the college football elite games of October. Not so much anymore. Prior to Saban's arrival, this was a must-see game, but now we're looking at an overall series of Crimson Tide 58-37 advantage, and there were 8 ties somehow along the way in this storied rivalry game. So, Christopher, from a betting perspective, what do you make of this big line in this rivalry game, and how can we exploit things to make some money?
Yeah, you mentioned the quarterback situation. I think if you've watched any of our Tennessee videos this year, we've repeatedly said, do not bet on Tennessee, no matter what, if Joe Milton is the quarterback. And Nick, you mentioned him running out of bounds at the end of the game, acting like they had another play. And he's completed less than 47% of his passes also. And actually, Hendon Hooker's fifth in the country in passer rating. So, Nick, you're spot on with wanting to at least have an idea if Hooker is going to play. It does sound like it's a pretty strong possibility. The thing that I wonder about is Tennessee has played 8 consecutive games. This is the 8th consecutive weekend Tennessee will have played. It's Alabama. They are not in any way, shape, or form expected to win this game. You have a bye week next week. So is this a week where Josh Heupel says, even if a guy could play, does he just want to say, hey, we're going to wave the white flag on this game. We're going to hold out some of our guys who are hurt, go into the bye week, get them an extra week of rest, because the biggest game of their season may be after the bye week against Kentucky, and needing to show that at least they're still in the top half of the SEC East, or at least still in the Florida, Georgia category this season. Then you take a look at the Tennessee offense, and you got 2 starters hurt, you got a running back hurt, you got a quarterback hurt. And Tennessee, of course, the thing that they do well, even though they basically run to set up the pass and they run to run well, their offense right now centers around the running game. So, Alabama has had trouble with tempo at times, but given the situation with injuries, I don't know that Tennessee is in the best position to exploit that. And on the other side of the ball, Alabama's offensive line is really the weakness for the Tide. And if you look at some of the advanced stats on Tennessee on both sides of the ball, on the offensive and defensive line, I just don't think Tennessee is set up to exploit Alabama on either side of the ball in the trenches in this game. So that's what I'm seeing heading into this game. But Nick, who are you betting on, and tell us why?
Well, let's start with this. Again, I'm not placing any bets on this game until Saturday because I'm waiting out the Hooker situation, right? But for the purposes of making our picks, and our picks aren't being made on Saturday and our contest must roll on, I'm going to make some picks assuming that he is going to play. And if he is going to play, I do like Tennessee plus 25. Not necessarily, like you said, a game that they're going to be contending to win on the road, but that's ripe for even a backdoor cover if you're down 30 points late in this game. And I do think the offense has shown that they're efficient enough and he's competent enough to keep this game within, 3 or 4 touchdowns. So I do like Tennessee plus 25. And I don't like the over of 67 in this game. I don't particularly like the Tennessee defense at this point in time. I think Alabama's shown they can score points again. Actually, they've really not had much trouble scoring points all year long. So when you talk about the pace and the tempo that Tennessee plays at, you talked about their defense being worn down a little bit. Alabama certainly able to score points. 67 is kind of a tough number to get to, but I feel like we can get there. So give me the over 67. How are you feeling about this game?
Yeah, I'm with you on the over 67. I mean, you got to love the Tennessee tempo if you're on an over situation, especially with Josh Heupel, because I think the longer he's in Knoxville, the faster that offense is going to run and the more snaps per game they're going to run, which is great for the over. The other thing is I'm actually going to go with Alabama minus 25 in this game. I think some of the players on Alabama that are sophomores or redshirt sophomores have never lost a game until 2 weeks ago. I've never played in a game where they lost. And I think some of the leadership on the team is starting to develop a little bit. They're starting to – I think Nick Saban had a tough time convincing this team that it wasn't good enough when they're coming off an undefeated national title season and they were still unbeaten. So I think they have changed a little bit since they lost to Texas A&M. But I just think this is a very bad spot for Tennessee. I think Tennessee right now is a beat-up, tired football team that's trying to get to a bye week and trying to get healthy. And if Alabama jumps on them early, it may be a long day for the Vols in Tuscaloosa. So for Nick Cole, I'm Christopher Smith for the 14, and we'll talk to you next week.